Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly live webcast, Elevenses. It's a lovely, well, it's actually not a lovely sunny day at the moment. The sun's gone in again. It was sunny first thing, but it seems to have clouded over. It's show number 244. It's Wednesday, the 8th of June. And I'm broadcasting from London, and we've got a packed show again today. I'll be talking about the customs issue, first of all, of transporting your bike to the EU rather than riding it there, and what the problems are. We'll look at the first ever e-bike only training school, which has just opened near Paris. Bosch are developing hydrogen compressors suitable for installation in filling stations, something that caused some controversy in the comments a couple of weeks ago. We'll look at also under-road inductive charging systems, which are being installed on roads in various parts of the world. Kawasaki have interestingly relaunched a 2023 model year Ninja 400. I'd never actually realized it had been discontinued, but it's back. And then finally, today's discussion point: bike noise isn't an issue in rural areas, claims a bike journalist. Is that actually true? I will say that I don't think it actually is. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 odd minutes. Don't forget, if you've got any comments, any questions, anything you'd like to ask, feedback generally on the show, suggestions for me to cover something in a future show, I'm more than happy to do that. So just use the comments as normal and I will get back to you. Kevin has looked in and said good morning. Good morning to you too, Kevin. Nice to see you again. All right, okay, so on with the show. First things first, though, don't forget, tonight I will be running the rescheduled live online talk event of Science of Being Seen, the Fine Detail. You may recall that I had a stonking headache after delivering this show last week. It wasn't technical problems, honestly. But anyway, by sort of 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it was fairly obvious that I wasn't going to be on my best form for delivering what is actually a fairly topical and also very complicated topic. So it's been rescheduled. We're running tonight at Wednesday, 8th of June. Tickets are still available. So if you get the chance to join me tonight or any time over the next 72 hours or so, the show is available to catch up if you can't be here with me live tonight at 8. Do come along and have a look at Science of Being Seen. Tonight's talk is all about visual perception, and the idea is that I'm going to be looking at how we actually see things on the road around us and what prevents us from seeing things. So it's all about visual perception tonight, and also some of the countermeasures that might work for riders to help prevent the issues. So that's 8 o'clock tonight. Tickets are a £5 from the usual place. The Tidy HQ events link is in the comment stream. So do come along to that if you possibly can. Right, on with the news. Well, since Brexit ended the customs union with the EU, crossing borders hasn't been the friction-free event it used to be. And one of the problem areas has involved those riders transporting their bikes to France and other EU countries in vans or on trailers. Now, it's a popular way of getting bikes to and from track days, of course. And I confess, when I had my old bus, my trusty Nissan Serena people carrier, I would actually fold all the seats down and load the bike into the back of it. And I took several trips to Europe that way, carrying the tent as well. I could always carry a little bit more that way, and it meant that if it did rain across northern France, I didn't get wet either, which was a bonus. Now, of course, race teams will also be getting their bikes to international events, and it doesn't just affect bikes, it affects cars and even possibly things like boats as well. So as I understand it, many people were actually surprised when we actually left the customs union to discover that they were actually being charged import duty on a vehicle that was being carried into the EU. Now, this is a problem which was, of course, an inevitable consequence of the post-Brexit situation once the UK was outside the customs union. Now, to avoid that, there's a solution, and it's called the ATA admission temporaire carnet. I'll just get a picture of that up in a millisecond. There it is. That's what it basically looks like, or actually I should say that's a website selling them. So this passport for goods, as it's sometimes known, is required as a globally accepted international customs declaration, and the idea is that it permits the tax-free and duty-free importation and exportation again of non-perishable goods. So in other words, if you're going to take something like your bike into the country, this is a declaration that you're actually going to take it out again, and you aren't actually going to sell it or abandon it in that country. Now, naturally, the document comes at a cost. If you have a look at that one, you can see exactly how much it does actually set you back, and it's not cheap. Typically, it appears to be around £300 plus VAT. There are different suppliers, of course, which will issue you with one of these tickets, but you also need to pay an indemnity fee, presumably in case you don't recover the bike, and a handling fee for the preparation of the documents, and of course there's VAT on the grand total. So if you're taking a 15k bike out of the UK, and if you use these people on screen, Bespoke Handling, then you're going to be paying something over £700 in total, and that's just to get your bike in and out of the country, on top of any other costs like ferries and petrol and your track day fee. So it's become a pricey operation to take your bike abroad in that way. Now, anyway, to cut to the chase, over the last few weeks, stories have been circulating in the press to the effect that this border crossing problem has been fixed by a new UK-EU understanding. And letters were actually sent out from the European Commission suggesting that there should be no difficulty or expensive customs formalities for moving vehicles in vans or on trailers, but it appears these reports were premature. And an advisement which came out this morning, I think it was, or possibly yesterday, from the National Motorcyclist Council, the NMC, says that they, as well as the Federation of European Motorcyclists Association, FEMA, and the Federation of International Véhicules Anciens, FIVA, have now received updated advice from the UK government's Cabinet Office Borders Group. And the UK government used this letter to reopen talks on the issue with France. And what's apparently emerged from those discussions is that the customs may take the view that a road registered vehicle, which is in the back of a truck or on a trailer, isn't therefore a means of transport for the purposes of crossing that border, because for the simple reason it's being carried by another vehicle and therefore it is determined to be goods in transit. Now, it appears that only some French customs have been insisting that motorcycles and cars in transport either pay the import duty and the customs fees, or are accompanied by this ATA carnet. So the problem is back to where we were some months ago. The UK, the EU and French officials apparently all in discussion, but until a final resolution is reached, FEMA, FIVA and the NMC are now advising that riders check with customs authorities about individual border requirements when transporting motorcycles to and from the UK and EU in a van or a trailer. So watch out for that if you're planning to head off for a track day or something later this year. Be aware that there is a problem. And Nigel has looked in. Good morning, Nigel. Nice to see you. Now, if you do make it over to France, you may come across the first unique training school which is dedicated to electric vehicles only. I suppose it had to happen, really. And this particular school, just outside Paris, is now offering training courses exclusively to those wanting to learn to ride electric two-wheelers. Philippe Monneret's Easy Monneret training aims to complete the same level of instruction that would normally be delivered on an ICE bike. And they say that for drivers with some prior experience on the road, the 7-hour course split over 2 days and taking on a 125 equivalent electric scooter should be enough to get them past the French French version of the motorcycle test. The school actually offers e-bike courses as well for children aged 7 to 12 on baby KTM. The school is based at Puteaux, and it's Monterey's first school operating e-bikes, but he plans to have 4 more electric motorcycles operating across France by 2025. Now, the interesting thing is, I thought the name actually rang a bell, and a quick Google confirmed what I thought. Philippe Monneray was actually a rather successful bike racer in the late 80s and into the mid 1990s, particularly as an endurance racer. That's where I came across him, as a big endurance race fan. I used to watch a lot of endurance racing, and he won several events, including the Le Mans 24 Hours, which he actually won on this bike, the free bike Yamaha. And his best results overall in the championship were a second and third in the World Endurance, so pretty accomplished rider. And he also had a couple of seasons on 500 GP bikes towards the end of his motorcycle racing career. Now, of course, electricity isn't the only alternative to gasoline and diesel, and many do see hydrogen as a key alternative fuel as the world attempts to wean itself off petroleum-based fossil fuels. Now, one possibility is a straight conversion of the internal combustion engine to run on hydrogen rather than petrol. Although the hydrogen itself would be carbon neutral as a fuel, it isn't emission-free at the tailpipe, something that the EU and the UK have announced as their goal for motorcycles by 2035. Although the combustion product of burning hydrogen is actually water, all substances, even your humble log fire, when burned in air, produce nitrous oxides because there is nitrogen in the air, of course. The heat of the reaction causes some of that nitrogen to react with the oxygen to form the NOx emissions. Now, most of those can be got rid of by a catalytic converter, but not all. So it's not a totally clean solution. So an alternative, cleaner technology uses hydrogen to a power cell. This combines the stored hydrogen and the oxygen from the air and the products of water and electricity, of course, which then used to power the electric motorcycles. The advantage, though, of using hydrogen as a fuel over a pure electric vehicle is that the compressed gas is more energy dense than electricity, basically. So the same amount of that you can store on the bike, you'll go further. Now, many experts do believe that the use of hydrogen is actually inevitable for hard to decarbonize transport sectors, and they cite areas like shipping, rail, and aviation, but also heavy-duty long-haul vehicles. But of course, there's no reason it can't be used in ordinary cars and vans, and this is where the Bosch, Rexroth, and Maximator hydrogen businesses have been working together, because what they have developed is actually what they describe as an affordable, low-maintenance, scalable system of hydrogen compressors, which are suitable for installation at conventional filling stations. And between them, 2 companies actually have the rather ambitious goal of equipping 4,000 refueling stations with the technology by 2030, when the rule comes in that all cars will have to be zero emissions. Now, ultimately, and if all goes to plan, every 3rd hydrogen filling station in the world would have Bosch components. So obviously they would like to take over that particular market. Now, Bosch say that the new container-based compressors have the potential to reduce the total cost for the operators by half compared to alternatives available on the market. And of course, that would be good for us looking to use a fuel for bikes and cars, because it would obviously drive cost to the end consumer down. Now, right now, it's the Japanese who seem to be showing more interest than the West in using hydrogen as a fuel, either for electrogen producing fuel cells or to burn in modified internal combustion engines. Suzuki, for example, have already created several generations of prototype fuel cell Bergman scooters, and some of those were even transferred to the UK, where they were trialled by the UK's Metropolitan Police back in 2017. Meanwhile, hydrogen burning internal combustion engines are a goal of Yamaha and Kawasaki, who are cooperating on a project. Kawasaki has actually already shown a converted H2 running on hydrogen. And Honda have also been working on fuel cells. They showed a prototype scooter way back in 2004. So don't forget, if you have anything to say or on this show, do ask away. If you do miss it, you can set yourselves a reminder. It goes out Wednesdays and Sundays at 11, nearly every Wednesday and Sunday. Occasionally I do miss a show due to other activities. If you can't catch it live, you can always get it on catch up here on Facebook, or you can head over to my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. That's the easiest place to find them. They're all listed there in a playlist. Right, we've got one comment there. I think that's a joke by Terry, so I'll ignore that. Terry, I'll come back to you later on that one. Right, so another technology that's been talked about is inductive charging. Now, this uses copper coils basically buried under the road surface to enable EVs to charge their batteries on the move. A successful trial has been carried out in Sweden. They converted a section of test track, 1.65 kilometers long, so you're not going from the one end of the earth to the other on it, but a similar 1 mile long test track of wireless charging road will actually open for trials in Michigan next year. And Michelle Miller from the Michigan Department of Transport explains the intent. She says, you're not going to fully charge a vehicle, but what it will do is extend the range for that vehicle, so somebody may not have to stop. Now, the other necessary components, of course, are the receiving coils, which fit beneath the EV and connect to the battery. Now, currently, no vehicles are fitted with such a receiver out of the showroom. And it would also need some kind of transponder, of course, which charges the vehicle owner for the electricity charging the vehicle. And just in case you're wondering, it does mean that the road surface will be live with the electricity. The ground element is buried, and so people and animals crossing the street aren't going to be electrocuted. Italy, Israel, the US state of Indiana, Purdue University are all working on similar projects, and proponents say that the technology's potential is limitless, and that apart from the elimination of range anxiety and time-consuming conventional charging, quote, it will make all EVs much more efficient, especially those intended for commercial use. And as a bonus, the automotive industry will be able to use smaller batteries. And I'll quote again from a recent press release from a company pushing this approach, the only inconvenience is that a portion of the asphalt needs to be removed and replaced. Couple of hitches I can see there. Well, first of all, of course, the UK can't actually afford to keep pace with the necessary repairs to conventional road surfaces as they continue to deteriorate. So it seems highly unlikely that anything like the available funds would be available for what would, quite frankly, be a simply massive program of upgrading the road network with inductive coils. Now, it's in the nature of a road to degree with use, of course, although if each coil is individually connected to the grid, there is redundancy if typical surface damage occurs, and that damages the underlying coil. So you'd basically skip one and move on to the next. I'd also say that the smaller battery claim is a rather dubious one too, since once you're off the grid, of course, it would severely limit the range of the vehicle you're riding or driving. So I would suggest that if this technology ever does see the light of day on the road, it's likely to be limited to a very restricted number of highways. Now, my guess is that we're far more likely to see wireless charging in a somewhat different format. And the obvious place for it to work is to recharge specific vehicles that stop regularly in the same places, and buses and taxis are obvious examples of this. If you laid the recharging coils under a bus stop or under a taxi stand, then those vehicles could be recharging whilst they're not moving. And if you think about it, buses stop fairly regularly, so there are lots of opportunity, and little top-ups to the battery could actually increase the range, I think, quite significantly. And actually, it's under a taxi rank is what's just been installed in Mulheim in 2019, and now more lately in Köln in Germany. So this project is being led by the University of Duisburg-Essen. Right, so, okay. Don't forget, if you enjoy the show, you can always head over to my coffee page and you can support me over there. A cuppa buys me well, just it pays me a cuppa, obviously, but it also buys you access to the back catalogue of survival skills Facebook posts, and there are quite a lot of them, around 800 at the moment. So you get quite a lot for your money over there. Month's access for the price of a cuppa. Now, a few days back, I was quite surprised to read that the A2 license compliant Ninja 400 sports bike is about to be relaunched in the UK, because quite frankly, I'd never noticed it had been away. Now, the 400 actually replaced the popular Ninja 300 as recently as 2018, and that earlier model had actually raced very successfully in the World Superbikes Supersport 300 Championship, and the 400 has continued in the same vein as a popular bike for intermediate license holders. Now, rather surprisingly, I discovered it was actually dropped in 2021, and the reasons aren't entirely clear, but I believe it was that for some reason the original 400 was only Euro 4 compliant, which seems slightly short-sighted, as it was well known that Euro 5 was coming in, and presumably some changes were needed to bring the motor up to current Euro 5 standard. I'm happy to be corrected if you know any better, but anyway, the upshot of this is that the new model is now with us. That is it. It's the 2023 model year Ninja 400, and as you can see, it gets styling which is very similar to the ZX-10R. You do get a rather more relaxed and road-friendly riding position with somewhat more upright bars. There's also a naked Z400, and that comes with a completely upright riding position, of course, and no fairing. That bike was also first seen in 2019 and was also dropped last year, and that will also return for next year. Now, both bikes are being quoted as producing exactly the same 44 horsepower and 28 foot-pounds of torque as the previous version, which is interesting. So it can't have been a serious modification to the engine. And they're both back in the Kawasaki catalogue now, available, it says, online from late summer. Price to be announced according to the website, but estimates are that it'll be around 6,250 for the sport bike there, and the naked bike probably around £250 less. But if you want a bargain, Kawasaki are still actually listing the outwardly identical and of course completely road legal 2019 400 Ninja, and that is £5,499 at the moment, so significantly cheaper than the incoming model. And as far as I can see, apart from being Euro 4 rather than Euro 5 compliant, which shouldn't be an issue for most of us, it is just the graphics on the body panels and on the fairing which are different. So, okay, on to my final point today, my sort of discussion point, bit of a rant today actually, because one of the things that kind of annoys me about these machines is that they are often listed with an exhaust system, an aftermarket exhaust system as an option, and Kawasaki actually offer the Akrapovic exhausts. Now, out of the factory, of course, when they are delivered and fitted even to your brand new bike, if you want one fitted, the dealer will almost always oblige. They are fully compliant with noise regulations, but of course nobody buys one of these to sound the same as the original bike. So I had a quick look around, and as you might well predict, there are plenty of videos online about how easy it is to take out the baffles in these systems. Now, technically, they're not removable, but it turns out in the case of the 400, and that is the 400 exhaust system there, that the bolt that holds it in is actually simply concealed behind a bit of plastic that looks like carbon fiber. So all you have to know is where the bolt actually is, and then drill a hole through that plastic, expose the bolt so that you can get a spanner in to take it out, and then having removed the bolt, the baffle is a simple push pull fit. So that is the baffle coming out of the Ninja 400 that we've just talked about. Now, That brought to mind an article which I read a couple of weeks ago, tutted over, I have to admit, and then kind of ignored. It was written on one of the websites by somebody called Alex Whitworth, and he was complaining about plans to introduce noise cameras on the A272 to help control noise pollution. And he went on to say, from a motorcyclist perspective, it is alarming to see motorcycles singled out in such a negative way by a government minister. And the article continued by talking about how Transport Secretary Grant Shapps had planned to introduce noise cameras to help those living in Britain's noisiest streets. Now, the writer said that was agreeable to him. And he says, in cities and urban areas, it would be understandable, especially at night, for example, for noise limits to be implemented. But here's where I lose the plot. The author then goes on to state that the A272 is a rural road, and he says it goes through towns, it goes through fields connecting towns with other towns. Well, yeah, okay, no argument with that. But then he says, absolutely bizarrely, what is the benefit in restricting noise on roads like this? Since, he says, they are places that are largely empty, and he says the impact on people is relatively low. Well, there are two simple answers to that question. The fact is, loud noise in quiet areas is actually far more intrusive simply because it's unusual. You don't hear jets, for example, if you live on top of an airport because they are flying overhead all the time. There's always jet noise, but they stick out like a sore thumb when you're on a quiet mountaintop. And the second point here is that in a busy urban environment, there are many, many sources of noise, including other traffic. So really, it is only the most exceptionally loud bikes that cut through the background hum. And that is, in fact, those vehicles, the bikes and cars, incidentally, that the noise cameras in urban areas are being targeted at. Now, the first lockdown actually was a bit of an eye-opener. You remember that virtually everybody stopped driving to work or for any other reason because all the shops were shut, of course. And there was peace and quiet even in big cities. It was quite remarkable how quiet London was. And in that peace and quiet, I actually got to recognise one particular bike. It was almost certainly a 600cc four-stroke, judging by the engine noise. And I could hear this bike approaching at speed on the North Circular Road, which is a good mile away from here. I could hear it turn off at speed onto the Edgware Road, which comes past where I live about half a mile away behind a whole bunch of roads all full of houses. I could hear it come down that road. I could hear it accelerate away from the several sets of traffic lights that are on that road near where I am. And eventually it would slip out of earshot on that road several minutes after I'd first heard it. Several minutes of listening to that bike. And indeed, at much the same time, in that wonderful spring we had in 2020, when riders were going out on the roads for recreational purposes, you'll recall, the BMF actually issued a statement asking all motorcyclists to respect those members of the community who don't ride or enjoy the sound of loud motorcycles. And they said it followed complaints from members of the public from all over the country. And you'll recall that I ran quite a number of articles about this in Elevenses. Now, the BMF advice 2 years ago was not to modify a bike to increase noise and to refrain from using high RPM in residential areas. But I ask you, why just residential areas? The countryside is even quieter than lockdown was in North London suburbs. And there I was last night on watching the television. At about 8:30, I was watching a program called Spring Watch, which, if you're in the least bit interested in ecology, takes you out into peaceful parts of the countryside and shows you nature in action. It's quite a fascinating program, in my opinion, but hey ho, I'm a bit odd that way. Now, it was visiting a place called Wild Ken Hill, which is near Kings Lynn in Norfolk. So it's not the absolute back of beyond, but whilst the presenters were talking on air, the peace was suddenly shattered by the sounds of motorcycles. And it wasn't just a gentle background hum as a bike with a well silenced or even a moderately fruity exhaust passed at relatively low revs. It was the full on wail of an exhaust system at high revs. And it wasn't just a one-off rider either. It was clearly a group ride out, and it sounded like every bike in that group had race cans on, and they were all riding at high revs. And the racket went on for approaching a minute, as I suspect a dozen or more bikes went past. Now, given that the presenters have been in the same place for over a week and in the same area in the seasonal shows that they do, there are 4 each year, one each season, and I haven't heard a single other vehicle from that location at any of the other shows. It just shows how loud those bikes actually were. So if you really think that noise isn't an issue, Alex Whitworth, and that most cycles are being singled out unfairly, I really suggest that what you do is go and pitch a tent for yourself beside a popular biking route, and then you'll find out for yourself just how annoying those bikes with illegal exhaust systems really are. So well done to those riders on BBC last night. You didn't simply succeed in annoying all the people living along your route, you also managed to broadcast yourselves live to the nation. As the BMF said in 2020, any rider who triggers a noise camera and the anger of the public, you brought it upon yourself. And I couldn't actually agree more. So rather than complain about bikers being treated unfairly in articles like this, how about taking some responsibility by calling out those idiot few who insist on spoiling the peace and quiet on country roads? But frankly, it seems a vain hope, because the same writer has just written an article on the same website about a race-inspired exhaust. So I can have a guess about what that sounds like. And guess what it's for? It's for the Yamaha T-Max 560 scooter. Right, so that is pretty much it for the day. We've got a couple of people looked in. Nick has said hello, and Kevin says, I enjoy riding and living in rural areas. I ride the A272. I do not have a loud exhaust, albeit I don't always claim to ride at low revs. Well, you know, again, if you've got a standard exhaust, the bike will be will make some noise at high revs, but it's not going to be the ear-splitting wail of those bikes that clearly came across on the mics yesterday evening. All right, okay, don't forget, it's Science of Being Seen tonight, delayed from last week, 8 o'clock, usual place if you want to come along and see that. I'm more than happy to have you along to talk about this complex topic. And if you are in the mood for a ride, hopefully a fairly quiet one, I'm going to be taking a small group out over the Chilterns and into the Thames Valley on, I'm just trying to remember when the date is. Hang on a minute and I will find it. I've lost it completely. I've got it somewhere, but I've lost it. It's online. Oh yeah, 25th of June, that's it. So that's again booked through the usual tidyhq.com booking link, which is in the preamble to this show. Right, that's it today. A little bit of a rant from me to finish off, but I honestly do get very, very fed up with motorcycles that make unnecessary amounts of noise. You may enjoy that noise. The vast majority of people who have to live with it don't. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget, we'll be back on Sunday with the next show. And if I don't see you tonight, I hope that I will see you then.